Thank you very much for coming on to the podcast, Nicola. It's great to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me, Lesley. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all my guests. What is your money story?
Oh, what is my money story? It's a very good question. I grew up without any money. It's a strange way of putting it, but I grew up working class family in Bradford, and we never had any money. Everything was done on a shoestring. I really remember stories about my mum and dad going without so that I could have a winter coat for school, and all sorts of things like that. It was a very difficult time sort of growing up during that period. And yet what's interesting is I'm a spender. I never had any money, but I'm a spender, and as soon as I got a few pennies in my purse, I was out there spending it on something. And my sister was a saver. We had the same parents, the same background, the same upbringing, yet as two individuals, we're incredibly different. I can't keep money. I can't save. I'm hopeless. And she's amazing. And all of that led me to leave school at 16. You talk about, my early career choices were very much determined by my relationship with money. I needed to earn money. I wanted to have money. I wanted income. I wanted to be able to do things. And so I sort of took a job over going to university. Initially, my aspirations were to get into radiography, and then I ended up working as a clerical assistant in the Inland Revenue, opening the post in a mailroom. And it's interesting because even during that time, I was still living at home with my parents, and the money was just slipping through my fingers, and my sister was bailing me out, even though she was on her pocket money. I actually have a terrible relationship with money. I certainly did in the early days. And over the course of the years, I got myself into debt. I got myself into big credit card bills and all the rest of it. And as a result of that, as I went through my career journey, I ended up making career choices that were based on the money that I could earn rather than necessarily what really, really intrigued me. So I'd walked away from radiography. I was offered a role working training as a clerk to a magistrate's course, and opted to take a role in a building society instead. And the only reason for taking that role was the mortgage subsidy. It was back in the 80s and interest rates were at 15.6%. I remember it vividly, actually. And I had a mortgage and I had bills to pay, and that was going to make such a fundamental difference. And there'd been various inflection points where I thought, gosh, why did I make that decision? It was basically because I didn't have money. I was actually afraid of opening bank statements at one point in my life, which was, again, just looking back now, was quite a difficult period of my life. And when my first relationship came to an end and I found myself living alone, living independently, I suddenly realized that things needed to change, that I needed to live independently, I needed to live comfortably, and I needed to not be worried about opening bank statements. And I think that was quite an inflection point for me, and I started to sort of knuckle down a little bit. I stopped the spending quite a lot, and I focused on my career, and I really, really grew during my time at the Building Society. It was Bradford and Bingley, you might be able to tell from my accent, but I really grew. I went through professional qualifications. I spent 10 years there, going from a fairly ministerial role into a leadership role, sort of looking at basically internal audit, risk management, internal controls. And that was really the starting point for a change in my relationship with money. And I started to make career choices based on opportunity and wanting to grow my career. And having spent 10 years in the Building Society, it's during the period where building societies were being privatised. We had consultants come in, they started doing a privatisation exercise on Bradford and Bingley. One of the outcomes of that obviously was privatisation, but the other outcome for me personally was actually joining the consultants that had been doing the work with us. I joined Coopers and Lybrand, that became Deloitte ultimately. And I joined to get more breadth to my experience, to expose myself to different industry sectors, to expose myself to different organisations and different sort of skills and capabilities. And that's the first time I'd ever really made that type of choice. spent 10 years in consulting, and I realized, I learned a lot actually about how businesses worked, and how money worked, and so much about the P&L structures and the balance sheet structures, and things that I'd never really thought of before suddenly started to materialize when you're working in an accounting firm. You learn an awful lot about how the world works, how taxation systems work, how welfare systems work. I've worked in the NHS, I've worked in construction, I've worked in chemical manufacturing, and the wealth of experience and learnings from that time, I just can't begin to describe really. And again, gave me a more professional relationship and perspective on money. Up to this point, I guess it was all about my personal finances, and gradually starting to move into, so how can businesses become more efficient? How can they become more effective? How can organizations do more with the same, or do the same with less, or the Holy Grail, do more with less? And all of those things came out of the sort of decade working with say Coops and Lybrand became PwC. I left, joined Anderson and became Deloitte, and all of that learning came from that sort of 10-year period. I then went on to work for William Hill. That's an interesting relationship actually, is sort of both organisationally, because as a gambling organisation, clearly your perspective on money again is influenced very much by the type of industry it was. When you were dealing with the regulator, dealing with the stats and facts on the markers of harm, the causes of harm, and the harm that gambling can do. I looked back on, I had a wonderful career there. I had a brilliant time there. One of the reasons that I joined the industry, I did think about it actually, I thought about it a lot, but one of the reasons I joined the industry was the group had a strong moral compass and had a clear, and demonstrated to me a clear appetite to do things differently. And that's one of the reasons that I joined. But it took me, being there for that period took me right back to my days as a young person without funds, and thinking, gosh, this is something which we need to be really careful about. I spent 10 years working in that organisation, and you can't hide from the fact that it is gambling, and there is harm caused to certain individuals. But I think the work that we did as a team, the work that we did as an industry, the regulatory changes that came through, I think definitely took things in the right direction. And from my point of view, I think from a commercial point of view, I felt as though I was doing all the right things. From a personal point of view, I felt as though I had a wonderful life on the back of that sort of time. I got to be the MD of the retail business. Gosh, school leaver at 16 to be the managing director of a 2,300 store, £3 billion turnover business. Quite some transformation. But I felt I needed to put something back in. I almost felt quite guilty. Not specifically about the industry. I think I'd have felt the same in any industry sector. I just felt, gosh, so many twists and turns in my life. How many decisions that I could have made differently that would have put me in a different place. I could still have been working in, I could have been working in a betting shop myself, or any other sort of retail store. And it really made me reflect on my relationship with my personal finances, and that I felt the need to put something back in. So I got involved in charity work. I became a trustee of two charities in various roles, one related to the industry, the National Horse Racing College, and one related to education, Changing Stars Malawi. So, funding and education provision for children in Africa. And had some great opportunities working with those charities, and it certainly, you felt that you were making a difference in a small way, Lesley, but I felt I was making a difference. And that is interesting. That actually led to being approached for a non-exec role in Sports Direct. Senior females becoming more prominent and obviously visible. And you look at Sports Direct at the time, this is back in 2018, and thought, gosh, that looks like a great opportunity, but they don't have a great relationship with their employees, or certainly that was the perception at the time. Mm-hmm. Lots of press about the way they treated people, the sorts of people that I felt I was. That's where I'm from. That's me. And I did a lot of soul searching about, is this the right thing to do? But having spent some time in the organisation, I realised what I was reading in the press was not what was really going on inside the organisation. And I agreed to join the board. I joined as an executive director, and I spend a lot of time now working in that business, thinking about the people aspects. I sit on the Remco. I've worked hard to make sure that we put thinking about our employees front and centre, and I've enjoyed seeing how the business has not just evolved. The business has evolved massively. We're now a £5 billion turnover business, a FTSE 100 business. We've grown from being Sports Direct to being Frasers Group, and we've got a whole hierarchy of different brands and fascias that sit within that group, from flannels to Frasers to USC to Sports Direct and many other sort of brands within that. So being able to sit on a board of a business like that, and remember where I came from, and always make sure that our conversations include conversations about remuneration and staff welfare and well-being and what have you. I think and influence decisions about those things has really made me feel, again, I'm putting something back in, I'm making a difference in my own small way. And so that's, I suppose, that's my relationship with money. That's my money story. And I thinking about coming on and talking to you today made me start thinking about wealth.
Yeah.
What is wealth? And for me, it's about freedom. And it's clearly, your health and your well-being are clearly important parts of being wealthy. But when I look back and think about my experience, that's a huge amount of wealth that goes beyond money. But what the money has done is enable me to have choice. Choice is a freedom. Choice is a massive wealth. And having money has enabled me to make decisions about where I can put back in, how I can support my family, how I can plan for the future. And actually, to enable my son, who's 19 now and has gone off to university, and I kind of look at him with envious eyes and think, oh, I wish I'd done that. I don't actually wish I'd done that when I reflect, because the choices that I've made have enabled him to do that. He's actually the first child in our entire family history that's gone off to university. I'm so proud. Honestly, I'm so proud of that. And it's because we had choice, and the choice was enabled about money. And so sometimes I do feel guilty about where I've got to. And sometimes I'm grateful. I'm always grateful, because, I don't care what my son does going forward for a living, but I'll know that he was able to make the choices about the things that he wanted to do, Lesley, rather than the things he had to do, or he was driven to do, or that he was desperate to do. And for that, I'm hugely, hugely grateful. And yeah, that's probably my story.
So many questions have come up during everything you shared there, Nicola, and I think it will resonate with, so many people that are listening to this podcast. But why do you think you have, that guilt essentially for where you are now versus the 16-year-old who was struggling with money all those years ago?
Guilt, yeah. I think it comes from the fact that I have lived a very different life, and to some extent, my family, some of my family still live a very different life. I mean, I don't want to go into the details. I do support them and look after them, but you kind of think things could have been so different. And there are people out there, you see it in the news every day. I mean, at the minute in particular, we're talking about the cost of living crisis, people that have to make choices between heating and eating, and that could have been me. And I still sit here now thinking that could have been me. And it does prick the conscience a little bit. It does make you think, oh my goodness me, I was so lucky. There are certain people in my career who've taken a chance on me for whatever reason. And don't get me wrong, I'm a hard worker. I don't think I've not blagged my way through life. I've absolutely worked hard, but certain people have sort of helped me on my way, helped me on my journey, given me the confidence to push on with things, backed me by spending their own money, I suppose, investing in me. I've always said that sort of you are your greatest investment, but other people have invested in me as well. I think, God, what did I do to deserve that? And that's, I think, where the guilt comes from. It comes from just reflecting that I've managed to escape the debt trap. I've managed to escape the money worries that I had, and so many people can't.
Yeah. And from your perspective, do you think, have you consciously changed your relationship with money, or has it just changed as a result of the experiences and opportunities that you've had so far?
I'm not afraid of opening my bank statements anymore. That's a massive change in my relationship with money, in that now it rather than it being a cause of misery in my life, it's an enabler in my life. I'm still a bit of a spender. The interesting thing, actually, probably the one thing that changed my relationship with money the most is my relationship with my husband, because he's more like my sister. He's a saver. And I actually think the two of us together, we have some quite difficult conversations about money when I want to do something and he says no. It causes some very challenging debates and discussions in the household. But I look back and think, gosh, if it wasn't for him, maybe I still wouldn't be as lucky as I am today, because I probably could have frittered it all away on retail therapy or other things. So yes, my relationship with money has definitely changed, and it's a far more conscious relationship now. It's a far more it's a positive relationship. I'd called it a toxic relationship in the beginning, and now it's a positive relationship because I'm able to use that to help other people, whether it be through as I say, giving my time as trustee. I donate a lot to charity. I do payroll giving. I support family members. I was able to support my nephew through a period where he wanted to make a career change, but it was, again, he was a little bit like me, locked in a role that he wasn't loving and wanted to take a change of direction. I was able to say, I'll support you through that that retraining process. So I enjoy it now. I enjoy it. I appreciate it. And it's a positive thing.
Which is brilliant. And what you were saying there with regards to the the difference in relationship that you have with money compared to your husband, that is something that I see frequently with my clients, is that difference. But the importance is talking about it and having that awareness. What I would love to do actually is after this interview is to send you a link to an assessment that I ask my clients to do, which is around their money archetypes, and to get you and your husband to do it, because there are 8 money archetypes and our relationship with money is directed by 3 of those archetypes. And very often we can find that our relationship with money, how we go about saving it, spending it, utilizing it, can be very different to somebody else. But when we realize what our knee-jerk reaction is to money when we're in certain situations, it allows us to consciously think about those decisions, and also consciously to think about why the other person we're having the conversation, why is it they're reacting in the way that they are? Because that allows to have a much more informed conversation. Because, you know, as you know, and as you described so eloquently during our conversation, is money is very emotive. Money can make us feel a whole raft of different emotions, and depending on how we then respond to those emotions, that can add a whole heap of other emotions as well.
Yeah.
And I think having that knowledge that money can be a really beneficial force, but equally a destructive force in our relationship with our husbands, our friends, our children, etc. And then understanding from our own perspective and their perspective how to have a healthier conversation can really make all the difference to it being that enabler or disabler, as again you so clearly described during what you were talking about.
I would love to do that. Actually, it'd be fascinating actually to see the outputs. And you're so right. And I think some of it comes down to experience, Lesley, because, you know, as a sort of 22-year-old, my first marriage probably fell apart partly because of my relationship with money and the debt and the problems and the challenges. And actually, we didn't really talk about it. I'd say the good thing that came out of that particular period of my life was I say this realization that I needed to grow up, that I needed to become financially independent and actually financially capable and a bit more responsible. Absolutely. And you know, the relationship that Graham and I have is very, very different as a result of that. So I'd love to do it. It'd be fascinating to see how it plays out. But I think, yeah, I wish when I look back years ago, I'd sort of had these sort of conversations and maybe understood some of this stuff a lot more than I had at the time. And we're always older and wiser, aren't we? You know,
after the fact, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I look back and say, yeah, I wish I'd done things differently. But I wouldn't say it's a regret, because it was never even on my radar to have thought about it. So it's not as though I made a conscious decision, but there was never really any education around money and financial matters back in the day. You know, and never had conversations through school about economics. You know, we did baking and dressmaking, and that was home economics, but nothing about the how you run a budget, how you manage your money. One of the things that we do at the National Horse Racing College actually is, as part of the training, is that, you know, a lot of underprivileged youngsters join us, includes budgeting and living independently. I think all school leavers of any age, even whether going on to UNIT, could really benefit from that. I think the provision's better now than it used to be, but
not massively.
No,
because I am involved in a pilot in a local school that is providing a number of units on financial literacy, and you know that involves understanding investment and how, you know, the sooner you start to save and the sooner you understand compound interest, what the benefits could be to your life, you know, later down the line. But the unit I deliver is on our relationship with money and how you should decouple your sense of self-value, self-worth from how much money you have in your bank account, how much money your parents have in their bank account, etc., etc. And a big part of what I get the pupils to do is to really think, they're 14, 15, they're year 10, and to get them to think about everything they're doing now, how is that feeding into the life they want to have? What dreams do they have?
Yeah.
What do they want to be doing? How much do they want to be earning? Where do they want to be living? The car they want to be driving, etc., etc. So they start to see there is a responsibility on them to be doing now that's going to be affecting them, in 10 years time. And it's really, really interesting how many people, just like you, say, there wasn't that education when I was in school. It's still not really there now. And that's shocking, isn't it?
I agree with you, Lesley. It's terrible, actually.
Yeah.
But, it's such a fundamental part of being able to live well.
Yeah.
Whatever you've got, being able to live well means you need to be confident with money, and you need to be articulate with it, and you need to have a different perspective on life. At 16, 17, you don't think about pensions. Yet, if I'd have invested even the smallest amounts at that stage, would have been in a much, better position now. I mean, I'm okay, right? I've been able to catch up a bit on pensions, but the first opportunity I got when I left my first sort of role was cash my pension in. You could do it back in those days. I said, I don't want a pension in. I'll just take the money, and I spent it. God knows what I spent it on, but I spent it. And I just think, no sort of really concept really of the consequences or what I was giving up. So yeah, I think there's a lot more needs to be done in that space to help people, and I think now is the time to act, frankly. We've had many years of low interest, and probably an easier way of looking at it, but I just think back, gosh, we're heading back towards these high interest rates, and 15% back in my day, it really was hard.
Yeah.
And people that haven't been through that probably will have taken out, and I can see it coming, will have taken out mortgages because money was cheap. I can remember actually when money wasn't cheap, and to an extent that's influenced my decisions about how big a mortgage to take on. And I always sat down as we've moved through, I've probably moved 8 or 9 times in the last 20 years, and each time I've always thought, could I afford this if the mortgage interest rates were at 10%? I don't think people do that, or haven't been doing that. And again, I think there's a naivety really that is there, because we don't teach people about what healthy relationship looks like, and how to plan for the long term as well as the here and now. Says me, who is a terribly in the moment person, but I look back and think, if I was myself again, what would I do differently? And that would be one of the things, definitely, trying to save a little bit more over a longer period.
I think also, what you talked about to do with, what is wealth, and having that real understanding that, having your health is your wealth, but actually having that freedom, that sense of security around money, that also feeds into your health. But also realizing that wealth in the truest sense of it, financially, is available to everybody if they believe it is available to them sooner rather than later, have that self-belief, and then put in place the action needed to create the plan to create the wealth. But recognizing there isn't just one destination to get there, there's several ways to get there, but be very intentional in the actions that you're taking. But even more importantly, being really, really aware of where you are your limiting factor, where you either not believing you are worthy of success, or not believing it is possible for you to take certain steps. And it may well be, when you were 16, if as your 16-year-old self, and this is a question I asked somebody last week, if a knock came to the door where you are now and your 16-year-old self walked in, what do you think she'd be saying to you during that conversation?
I think she'd be asking me how on earth did you get to where you got to, and how you know, what were the steps, what were the tricks, what were the things that you did, and you know, how can I follow in your footsteps? And what I would say back to her is, actually, don't follow in my footsteps. I had no clue, no idea what I wanted to do. I think the comment that you made earlier actually was about just sitting back and thinking. I didn't sit and think. I fell into things. I was, you know, I stumbled, tripped into roles, and as I say, it was my early career choices were really money dictated. I just needed to earn enough money to pay the bills and get out of the mess that I was in. And I think if I'd sat down and had that conversation with my 16-year-old self, I would have advised her to sit down and think really about what she wanted to achieve. I always had a chip on my shoulder about, I suppose this is where the worthiness comes from, about not having an education, not having A levels, not having a degree. Now, I could prove to her that now you don't actually need those things to achieve and succeed. And I've met so many people on the journey who are the same. You know, they've left school, they've dropped out, they've started on a route and changed. And I think that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not worthy, that you're not deserving. I think that's where some of mine comes from, I think, on reflection of today's conversation. But you know, believing in yourself and believing in your capability, and accepting that it really is you who makes the choices about what you go for. And if you build relationships with people and you build trust and you show integrity and authenticity, and you know, you work hard, people will help you and invest in you. You know, it's mentioned it earlier, but could I have done everything I've achieved all completely on my own from just planning it out? Absolutely not. But have I, you know, shown people what I'm capable of, and that I'm worthy of that you know, investment in? I did my professional qualifications during work. It was funded by my employer, and you know, I came out with a professional qualification that sort of leapfrogged me over all the academic stuff. It only happened because I proved that I was capable, and someone gave me the opportunity to go for it. So I would say, you know, if anyone speaks to you about opportunities, grab them with both hands. And you know, you talk about imposter syndrome. That's another, you know, it's more of a female trait than anything. You know, when I was offered the role of the MD of retail at William Hill, I thought, oh my God, I can't do this. You know, I've never done it. I've never run a P&L before. I've never had to be responsible for profitability. I can't do this. I sat down and actually had quite a strong word with myself and said, you can do this. You've kind of been doing it, you know. And I sort of look back on where I'd come from, various roles, and thought, well, actually, you've done this just on a smaller scale. So just, you know, get a grip, and prove that I can do it. And I think having that confidence and that self-belief and that motivation and a little bit of ambition makes up for such a lot. It really does, you know. I think if you just believe in yourself and find a couple of people who will believe in you too, it's actually makes such a difference.
No, I totally agree. And, you know, something that I very often say, and I'll say to my children as well, I say it to clients, you know, borrow my belief in you until you believe it too.
And really good point.
Absolutely. And I think it, you know, it goes that if somebody sees something in you, choose to believe them. Choose to believe that what they have seen, they are correct to have seen it. And then a point will come where you go, well, do you know, they were right, rather than, well, I'm going to prove them wrong because I'm going to fail. Because whoever would ever think that, well, I'm going to prove them wrong, I'm going to totally fail in what they believe. You know, nobody ever thinks that. So borrow their belief, just as you were doing, that you could manage the P&L, and look what happened for you. And I think for lots of us, we can, even as adults, we can still have that that lack of belief that we had as children. You know, when somebody says, oh, I love your handwriting is so neat, or you sang that solo brilliantly, and I go, what they're talking about? My handwriting's rubbish, and God, no, I can't sing at all. Well, actually, if someone's telling you those things, it's evidence that it is true. So just for now, borrow their belief until you are able to utilize it for yourself.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. You know, it's really reinforcing when you hear someone say to you, you can do these things, you are amazing. You have to, that to me is the key thing. It's confidence and self-belief, or having others believe in you, that sort of almost give you permission really to go after things. I think money's role in all of that is it's just it gives you that little bit of stability, that little bit of security, and it allows you, if you build up just a sensible strategy for financial security, that if you're financially secure, and someone believes in you and can encourage you to go for the next step, you've got everything that you need just to go on to the next level and keep building on it and keep building on it and keep building on it. But as I say, I think the investment in yourself will pay more dividends than any financial investment in any bank account or stocks and shares or anything. Invest in yourself, and whether that is in becoming, money savvy, whether it is in making that career change that will take you in a different direction. I realized that running after the money wasn't getting me anywhere other than keeping me out of trouble. But when I changed the relationship and made the ambition and the growth and the opportunity the priority, the money flowed after it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Interesting. The money came with it, because all of a sudden I was doing something that I enjoyed and that I was motivated to do and that I felt inspired to do, and that I then got a lot of pleasure out of. So it made me want to work a little bit harder at it. It's changing your focus on yourself rather than on money itself.
Absolutely. A phrase that I have coined is, where mindset goes, money flows. And I think I think that is so true, that once you have put yourself in a position where you're just not constantly either chasing the money or worrying about the money. And I don't necessarily mean, we are in, a very different situation at the moment. I'm very mindful about, cost of living crisis, etc. However, I'm also very, very mindful that the media want to always pull us down, bring us down, rather than raising people up and building that sense of the art of the possible, what they can do for themselves. It's a little bit like trying to, whip away the chair as you go to sit down, and automatically you fall over. And I think the media has a lot to do with people feeling pushed into a corner, feeling as though things are terrifying that they cannot take personal responsibility for, rather than actually looking to the evidence of people who are doing well in this environment and thinking, they're doing okay. What do I need to do to replicate it? What can I do to help myself? Why am I allowing myself to be influenced by these negative messages that are going on? And I think the more that we are able to look at opportunity and work out, how can that be for me? What can I do to actually put myself in the best position to move myself forward? And I think when you are in that mindset of recognizing, well, actually, it isn't about sitting back and dreading what is happening. It is actually taking action and preventing the situation, for me personally, either from getting any worse, or more positively, what can I do to influence it getting even better?
That's right. That is absolutely right. And, you know, there's a saying, isn't there, that, you know, good news doesn't sell newspapers. It doesn't, right?
Yeah.
It's always, you know, horror stories. I think you're right. The media have got a lot to answer for across all of these things. And, you know, you do, every time you turn the news on at the minute, it's bad news, it's interest rate rises, it's more taxes, it's increasing fuel costs, and none of those things are untrue, right? None of those things are untrue. But I think what you have to do is stop thinking about these things are being done to you and happening to you and effectively being a victim, and start thinking, okay, so how do I respond to these changes in my life, these changes in my circumstance, and having a plan and just taking ownership and responsibility for it. And I know that's easy to say, but I have been in a situation where things look really, really desperate, and I thought, there's two ways I can go here. I'm going to end up being declared bankrupt, yeah, because I've just sat here and carried on in this spiral of not taking responsibility, or I can deal with it. And I chose to deal with it, and I chose to take steps, and I chose to, you know, I chose to build my career, and I chose to get professional qualifications, and I chose to live a little bit differently in order to make sure that I didn't have that financial exposure. And over, yes, it's taken a long time, but oh God, it was so worth it. And it is absolutely about just changing your mindset. Don't let this stuff happen to you. Get it by the scruff of the neck. Give it a right good shake. Sit down. You know, be clear on your finances. Be clear on where you can make changes, and own it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And absolutely own it.
Yeah. And that's a perfect place, I think, to end. And I think that message is really said loud and clear, and one, you know, I support and reinforce, I hope, on this podcast time and time again. So how can people connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. You'll find it's just Nicola Frampton. I'm fairly easy to find, but I'll share all the details so that people can connect with me. I'd be more than happy to hear from people, and yeah, that's probably the best way of getting hold of me.
Perfect. And your LinkedIn details will be in the show notes, so people can easily connect with you. Thank you very much, Nicola. I have loved talking to you today. It's a conversation that I could carry on talking to you for hours, because I can see how much it resonates with you, and it certainly resonates with me. So thank you very, very much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Lesley. It's been a pleasure.